Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur. I hope that you're doing well. I hope you're having a great week. It is Tuesday, Tag Tuesday. Time for a quick book tag, and it's going to be the Mookse and Gripes bucket list tag. I was kindly tagged by Shelly Swearingen hilariously at the end of her video, which I'll link in the description box. And of course, the tag originates from SHAWN the Book Maniac and his deep appreciation for the podcast. I'm not a huge listener of podcasts, but my wife is, and so I've recommended it to her. And the principle being, just identify 10 books that you'd like to read, I'd like to read before I shuffle off this mortal coil. And so I've identified my 10, and they're ranked into 5 pairs, sort of in an ascending order in terms of how challenging it will be to read and really enjoy these specific works. And so, I'm sort of ascending Jacob's ladder as I go through these. So the first would be a pair of books that I included on my top 9 TBR on Instagram a couple months ago. Writers I'd never read anything from, but I've heard universally great things about both of these writers and these specific books. And that would be Cavalcade by Karen Boy. It was recommended by Dario from Motley Reads. And I love dystopic fiction. I had never heard of Boy. This book was published sort of right in between Brave New World and 1984. And it seems to really just fit right into that niche of books, but it's from a writer with a very distinct voice, a very distinct identity. And so I'm really curious to find out what's going on here and just how amazing it actually is based on what Dario said. The other would be Kamar Lai, The Radiance of the King. This is his only non-autobiographical novel as far as I can understand. He was a writer from Guinea in West Africa. And so I've really been interested in wanting to read this, and I've kind of been reading some other African writers to get a feeling for the context of Lai's Radiance of the King. So I'm really excited for both of those. I'm going to read both of those before the end of 2021. But again, there are writers I had never heard of until fairly recently, and writers whose voices I definitely want to add into that sort of chorus that I have in my mind whenever I'm reading books. I think people know I like to make connections, and these are 2 writers I want to be able to make connections with throughout the rest of my reading in my life. Now, next, I have 2 books that I have and that are going to require intense focus to read. I've read plenty of long books across my lifetime, especially across the past 19 years roughly, since I was 16 and really started reading a lot of more, intensive adult fiction. They're not purchased at adult bookstores. But the first of those would be Babur and the Baburnama, the memoirs in hilarious detail and flattering and unflattering detail of the great ruler, the founder of the Mughal Empire, living in the very late 15th century, early 16th century, writing in the early 16th century. And this is a very recent publication. My wife discovered that this book existed and got it for me for Christmas last year. And I've really just been waiting to sort of clear some space and schedule to be able to spend time dwelling with Babur and traveling with him and eating and carousing and loving with Babur, because the samples I've read from it are just an absolute delight, and I'm very excited. I'm probably going to read this starting in November. We'll see. The other book, again, one that's longer that I've read sections from, I've dipped in and out of, but I haven't read the complete work, and I'm excited to. But again, I want to have time. I want to have the headspace to really be able to focus and appreciate what's going on, not to speed read through it, but to really appreciate what's going on. And that would be Ducks Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. I'm really excited to read this, and I'm hoping that in the near future that space will exist for me and for all of us, truly. So the next tier, so we have books that I had never read anything from the writer, but I'm very excited to. Books that are going to require real intense focus because of their length and the detail they explore. Up next is this is sort of where the tier jumps. This is one where you really gotta be able to stretch to reach this next tier, and that would be works in translation, specifically works that maybe haven't been translated into English yet, both from the Spanish language. So the first of those would be from Selva Almada. I read her Dead Girls last month. I was astounded by it. The sense of poetry specifically and the lyricism across what was a very dark and journalistic investigation around femicide. And so it turns out Selva Almada is also a novelist and primarily a novelist, and so I would love to read some of her works. And Charco Press is supposedly publishing her 3rd work soon. and it's going to be Brickmakers, and I'm excited to read it when it comes out. I'm really hoping that translation occurs, and that it will be coming out very soon, possibly even later this year. So that's the first one. That's a translation that seems imminent. The other is a translation that has not existed for around 90 years at this point, 80 years at this point. And that would be a translation in English of Hombres sin Mujer by Carlos Montenegro. He's a Cuban novelist, and it's never been translated into English. From the descriptions of it, from references I've seen, comparisons I've seen from different Spanish language writers, thriller writers, it seems like it's a perfect book for sort of my headspace, heart space, exactly the type of book I like. It's never been translated into English. So I've seen that there are Spanish language copies, and my Spanish like speaking level is about that of a first grader. My Spanish reading is a little bit higher because I can read at my pace rather than try and hear it and translate, and I just can't do that when someone's speaking to me. But if I can read it at my pace, it's something that might be a goal, a stretch goal, like in the future, if it still is not being translated in English. So it would translate into Men Without Women. It just seems like a really intense book. So that's tier 3. Tier 4, books that are prohibitively expensive for me to accomplish in my reading. So I'll start with the ones I kind of sort of have and have made a dent in, and that would be Virginia Woolf's essays. I really enjoy Virginia Woolf as a writer. I absolutely love Mrs. Dalloway. The Lighthouse is excellent. Between the Acts is fascinating, if not quite great. But her essays are amazing. Of course, many people are familiar with The Common Reader. There's a couple of Common Readers out there. But there are so many other essays she has, and so there are editions of her collected essays, and I have a couple of them. But there are many more. And they're expensive. So this is why I have my Tiger shirt on, because I scour used bookstores now that it's kind of safe to, for a while it wasn't. But I put the mask on and I have the eye of the tiger when I'm at the used bookstore. I'm looking for the things that are rare, the things that you can't find online for an affordable price. So I'm hoping that over my lifetime, I'm going to acquire the rest of the Virginia Woolf essays and be able to enjoy and read those. Because I've loved the essays I've read so far. And I love those that aren't collected in the Common Readers. But the next one, this is a real sort of grail, chalice to find. And that would be Lumumba Speaks, the collected speeches and writings of Patrice Lumumba, whose murder in the early 1960s is one of the most consequential and tragic murder assassinations of the latter 20th century. And what it meant for Africa. But there was a translation of many of his major writings and speeches that came out some years after he was murdered. And I believe the introduction is from Jean-Paul Sartre. This book exists for roughly $300, $250, and you can find it periodically in university libraries. But again, I've got the eye of the tiger. I'm hoping at some point over the next 50, 60 years that I have, that I'm going to find a copy for much less than $200, $300, and I'll be able to spend time with it. I've read sections from it, again, university library copies, but I'd like to have my own copy to be able to read and really pay attention to. So that's, again, we moved from books that are just hard, you got to pay attention to read, to books that maybe haven't been translated in English, to books that exist in English, but they're really, really expensive. And now the final tier, books that maybe they don't quite exist. So I'm going to put The Winds of Winter from George R.R. Martin on here. I really hope that I get to read that book. I really hope that it's published and that he's able to bring it to a completion that he wants, and to be able to publish that. And I would be excited to read that book. The other is a book that probably going to be tougher to come by, but I'm an optimist. I'm a perpetual optimist, and I'm holding out hope that somewhere in Egypt, in some pottery, they're going to find the pages that would give us the complete poems of really any of the Greek lyric poets, but specifically those we have so little from. What we have from Sappho is amazing. What we have from Anacreon or Alcaeus is amazing. I would love the complete works of Sappho. But I think it would be really cool if we specifically had the complete works of Knossos, another of the Greek poets, and specifically what were called the earthly muses, the women poets who existed in ancient Greece. And so I want to read a sample from one of the epigrams we have of Knossos. Nothing is sweeter than love, and all delicious things are second to it. Yes, even honey I spit out of my mouth. Thus saith Knossos, but he whom the Cyprian loves not, knows not what roses her flowers are. I think that's amazing. I would love more. I would love the complete works of Knossos, the complete epigrams and epitaphs written by Knossos, but I'd settle for Sappho, and I would, I guess, sort of settle for Anacreon, but I would like Knossos more. So that's my bucket list, my Mookse and Gripes tag bucket list. Feel free to comment. I've kind of identified which ones I'll be reading first. But again, I appreciate the comments, and check out the podcast. My wife is, at least. So hope everybody's having a great week. Thank you.